name's JC McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org. Hello out there, everyone. I'm Nyesha McCauley, and welcome to Civic Beat. Well, it is fall, and since it is fall, we're heading into hot and heavy into election season. It is an election year, and of course, we want to keep you locked into all the news and info that you need to know going into this election cycle, and to really dive into what's going on out there. On the candidate run and in the streets, hot and heavy in the streets, talking about voting and getting out the vote. I'm bringing back someone who has been here before, someone who is an advocate, fiercely fighting for the educational opportunities for our young people. But this time, this guest is coming back with a new title they're going to add to their name, and that is candidate. And it is none other than candidate Gwen Samuels. Come on in, Gwen.
Good morning, Miss Nyesha. Thank you so much, because this is my first online TV interview as a candidate for State Senate District 13.
Well, amen. So, Gwen, folks know your name, they know your face, they know that you have been out here advocating. What prompted you to throw your hat in the ring and become candidate Gwen Samuels?
First, I want to say I'm just an everyday, people don't believe me, but I am an everyday mom and grandma. I got to make payment arrangements like most people in America, in Connecticut. And you know, this was just another election year for me, positioning myself of who I was going to vote for. Who can I make an informed decision for? Because I know this year, if no other year, 2024, post-pandemic election year, it's just a critical election. Things aren't business as usual. Some say they are, but this is a new kind of business as usual. I'm concerned about the state of safety in our public schools. I'm just concerned about children, period. Those who are dependent on the adults to make informed decisions. And it was just in early May, I just got tired of just seeing so much happening with kids. So in May, I just jumped in the race out of the blue. When I say out of the blue, you couldn't get no more blue than out of the blue than I jumped in this race. Because I had no clue what to do. So then it's one thing to watch people run, right? I've watched your amazing husband. They call him Mayor Stan McCauley, right? I saw that run. This was the first time, like on the ground in Hartford, participating in civic engagement in one of the largest urban districts in Connecticut. And just to see the courage it took. And I'm like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. Because he's so, and I threw my hat in the ring. And boy, did I get an eye-opener of the gatekeepers that are in existence on all parties. I'm going to say all parties. Or I should specify the two majority parties, because those are the only two I really know. I saw a lot of gatekeeping, but I jumped in for children. I jumped in for me. I jumped in for my family. I jumped in for my neighbor's family. I jumped in because we cannot sustain. We cannot, without working together, we won't be able to handle what's coming, because it's here. It's not coming. The inflation, the, school safety, public safety, everything's heightened, which is why I jumped in. Excuse me for going the roundabout way, but I'm still trying to process. I'm in the race.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Because coming in May, it is if you are running for office, it can be a little bit later in the election cycle. So I totally understand what you're saying about jumping in and still trying to process all of it, because once you jump in, everything starts to move so quickly and so fast, and you're like learning all the new terminology and all the rules and regulations that you have to abide by in order to just get your name on the ballot. So speaking of getting your name on the ballot, where are you on the ballot, Gwen? And tell us a little bit about that process of getting on the ballot.
So, first, I want to encourage those who have a dream of running. This would be the time to keep dreaming. We need new leadership. We need new diversity of thought. We as a state and as a country, but I'll focus on the states. I'm a state senate. We are stagnant with the same people promising the same things, promising things they cannot deliver because they are not God. So the process was unbelievable, gatekeeping, barriers, and I'm also running to teach. Brother Stan, I love you. He said, when you can't do both, you can't teach and run to win. But I'm encouraging people to watch my race. If nothing else, I need to focus on winning. But the process, the misinformation changed from one registrar's office to another, from one clerk's office in a city to another. I went to Middletown, and I'm calling out towns. It's like blaming for us to get better. Middletown is District 13. That's part of my district. I have all of Meriden. So no matter who votes for me in Meriden, they can vote for me. Middletown is part. Cheshire, which I'm learning, is part. Middlefield is all. But on August 6th, when I was petitioning to get to become a petitioning candidate, meaning I had no party, it was none on the paperwork with the Secretary of State, right? So I'm an independent, if you will, or unaffiliated for purposes of that nominating petition. And on August 6th, my signature was due by August 7th. Pay attention to the timeline. My signatures were due August 7th by 4 p.m. On August 6th, one day before, I went down to the registrar's office saying, I need a better handle on District 13. They told me they didn't even have one. This is the day before my signatures are due. That's the type of misinformation that is happening. And so I'm like, is this and so you take it with stride. So I knew I had to focus on what I knew. And then I worked on Meriden. Then they told me I had 114 signatures, and I turned in like hundreds and hundreds. So I got a little dejected. The city everyone said, keep fighting. At about 2 p.m. or maybe say 4 p.m. I was almost done. And they said, keep at it. You almost got a few more minutes. I said, no, I'm done. Because you said only had 100 and something. Come to find out, I had 325. I only needed 329.
Oh, wow.
You understand?
Yes.
So, but because I believe God gave me permission to do this, because nothing about this makes sense, that I'm on the ballot. It could be nobody but God, because those gatekeepers were on double time. And that's when I knew I was doing the right thing. And if you would gatekeep me, that means you're going to gatekeep every other new candidate that wants to be able to be a positive solution. I'm here as a solution, as part of the solution, not the whole solution. So fast forward, I didn't make the nominating petition. So they told me to wait till the 8th to do a conceding. There was no point, because the people signed my petition. I wanted to keep the people that believed in me up abreast of my whole journey, which I did online.
Right.
And I conceded like at 4:05. And then a Spanish lady called me 6:00 in the morning the next day, August 8th, and said, I heard you could be a write-in. I said, find out the information. I'm in it. I'm in it for the people that I promised that if they got me on the ballot, I would see it to the end. And I went to the Secretary of State's thing. I did a write-in. That information was wrong. They told me I couldn't even do a write-in until after the primaries, August 13th. You could be a write-in after August 7th, after the last date. These were the type of misinformation. So I lost a whole week of trying to at least get my name out there because I thought I was going to be a write-in.
Right.
But oh, but God, I'm going to tell y'all, the Independent Party, they had a survey. And so they were like, fill out the survey, Gwen. And so the Independent Party is a minor party in Connecticut.
Right.
And I didn't even know that because I used to get confused between the unaffiliates and the independent because I'm an independent thinker.
Yeah.
So I never considered that a party.
Right.
Right. But anyway, fast forward, they had a convention and they invited me to it. And I sat there and just watched the Knights of a Round Table, which was a square table. But I appreciate the due diligence they did. They just went through the names and then they got to mine and I listened. And the lady said she knew me from when I was with Connecticut Parent Power. That was back in 2008 or 9.
I remember Parent Power.
God, you know,
yes.
You talk about someone make you run. God know how to make you run out the door.
Yeah.
You understand? With no shoes on.
Right.
And so, and then they did it. And so then they voted and they said, you know, we're going to endorse Gwen Samuel. So I went from the back of the bus, and you can't get no more back of the bus. I was in the back of the bus with no name.
Mm.
And God gave me, and I'm going to say, God, I know I'm not religious, but I can't.
You're a woman. You're a woman of faith. You're a woman of faith.
There you
You're
go.
A woman of faith.
I am very much a woman of faith, and God showed up, and then I got the endorsement. So I moved from no name, bottom of the ballot, where people had to remember my name to even spell it, to 4D. So I am row 4. Is it row 4? Column 4.
Yep.
Row D.
And that is the independent line.
Yes, the independent line 4D. So candidate Senator Samuel is on the ballot and in the race. I was in the race either way because I was determined to be in the race, because for us to get the change we need, we must be the change. We keep quoting these things. Be the change you need. Well, you really will have to do some work to be the change.
And that's what I think is so amazing about your story. And thank you for sharing that with us, Gwen, is because it does require tenacity, perseverance, persistence, just to continue on, particularly in an environment where you don't know the rules and the rules do change. And as you had stated, gatekeepers and others who would not want you to be a part of this process or this system because of, again, it's the status quo and people don't like change and they don't like to make room for other voices around the table. And so what you're describing is just that stick to it and keep going. And when one door closes, another one opens, and be ready. And I think that's the other thing that I'm hearing is that you're ready. You're ready for this fight. And I think everything that has been in your past leading up to this point, I would say, has prepared you for this particular round, right? This particular journey.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because the reporter, because some of the questions like, well, who is this lady? She just jumped on the scene. Why didn't she start local? Right? So number one, everything is intentional and strategy, right? And where you live, retaliation is real. I'm a parent. I had children in my Meriden public school systems. So even for advocates, and I'm talking to advocates out here, especially if you are a parent leader, especially if you are a single parent, right? Where you are the sole provider of your home, how you move in advocacy matters. Because sadly, we live in a state where people take things out on your kids. People take things out on you, right? And so even in my fight, I had to choose my fight strategically where I live. But number two, so I looked at the needs of my city. So I never ran locally, but I did local things. Like I developed our first Meriden Kids Walk safe routes to school. Because everyone talks about the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. If those babies can't get across the street safely, What Apple ABCs and 1, 2, 3s they're about to learn. And in my city, we had children walking across highway ramps. I'm talking major highway ramps. And this is why you have to pay attention to housing patterns. Because where our houses are built, especially for your urban and your low income, they're always by the highways. That's just patterns across the country. If you think about housing patterns as it relates to brownfields, I think Hartford had that, where people were building on poor quality areas, right? So when you think about urban and think about housing, right, de facto segregation and all these things that just occur just by how we build, right? And so I saw that in my town. So I stayed away from my town for the super heavy issues because I go so hard. But I weighed in when I needed to. But I did know to help some of the most vulnerable communities in my city and in my district, I had to work at the state level. So I realized that's why my partnerships with larger urban districts are strategic. Hartford, New Haven, Waterbury, Bridgeport. I have strong allies there. That's because when the state thinks of urban, it only thinks about those larger districts. It doesn't think about the smaller African American Black populations in towns like Meriden, Middletown, Wallingford, right? Cheshire. We have diversity in many of our communities, but in some, the populations are smaller than others. So I always had to work at the state level and at the federal level to help my most vulnerable in my community because we didn't have the numbers for the advocacy. So when I fight, for the most part, it's a heartfelt fight. Don't hurt children, you won't have a problem with me.
That's right.
You hurt children, you about to have a problem you just don't want. And Congressman Lewis, God rest his soul, said it well. We must always be prepared to bring good trouble.
That's right.
Me jumping in the race is good trouble because career politicians and those who have gotten comfortable with the status quo, and I want to define status quo for those who are listening. You hear all these terms, leftists, rightist. I have no clue what half those terms mean. I know left to mean left hand, left signal. Come to find out it means Democrat. Right hand, I thought right signal, but if right means conservative, right? Everything doesn't mean, it means something else. So for me, when I say the status quo, I am talking about the existing structure, right? So when I'm talking to my constituents, my future constituents, I want you to know I am fighting against the existing structure. It's personal, but it's not personal. It's personal because you're making decisions, existing structure, that's hurting my family, that's hurting me as a taxpayer in voting. So that makes it personal. But the individuals and their private lives aren't my business.
Right.
What you do as a public elected official or an appointed official, now we can talk.
Right.
Well, and
Well, Gwen, and I just love talking to you because when we started this conversation, you talked about the mix of running to win, but also educating. And I think you marry those two things really effortlessly. I want to get a little bit more. I want to touch on vote for the other guy before we have to break. But speaking of break, I just want to take a quick break and come right back, and we're going to get a little bit more into vote for the other guy, and then share more information about where folks can actually vote for you and when voting is and all that good stuff. But we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Funding for this video was provided by the Scholars Strategy Network.
Voting is an important right of citizenship and gives us a say in the decisions that affect our lives, our communities, and our country. In this video, we are going to talk about who can vote in Connecticut, how to register to vote, and then cover the 3 main ways you can participate in elections in our state.
Hi, I'm Secretary of the State, Stephanie Thomas. Did you know this is a historic election year? Sure, we'll be voting for president, but for the first time ever in Connecticut, we have early voting. Under the new law, you'll be able to vote in person for 14 days before Election Day. You can have your say, your day, including nights and weekends. But there's more for us to do after the election because our policies are not written on Election Day. Whether it's working for election reform, sharing your policy ideas with the legislature, or choosing candidates, the power is with the people. And until we all believe this, it's very easy to feel like our votes don't matter. So please make your voice heard in every election. And then remember, our civic obligations don't end once we cast our ballots. We need to continue our civic engagement every day of the year. And if you don't know where to begin, we've got you covered. Visit our website at civics101.ct.gov for information about early voting and how to stay civically engaged all year long. The power is in your hands, and I can't wait to see how you use it.
Let's start with eligibility. If you can.
All right. Thank you, Gwen, for staying with us through that break. This is Civic Beat. I'm Nyesha McCauley, and we're talking to candidate Gwen Samuel. And Gwen, you were mentioning before the break a little bit, related to what we just saw about the power being in your hands and the power of advocacy. One of the things that you have done, in the many things that you have done, is started a messaging campaign, Vote for the Other Guy. And I want to touch on that a little bit because I think you jumping into the race sort of embodies the messaging of what that campaign is all about. Would you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely, because I interviewed with you on September, almost a year ago, around this time, September, because I launched it in 2023 because we saw the unintended consequences of the pandemic, right? High chronic absenteeism, domestic violence, children being super isolated, right? And so now they're back in the classroom and behaviors. Our teachers are already struggling, right? And so when I launched Vote for the Other Guy, I understood at that point the importance of working with vulnerable communities around civic education, because I think we've gotten so we say vote, vote, vote. What does that mean? People have lost the history of voting, because for some, it doesn't apply to them now in the 21st century. It's hard for people to wrap their head around the civil rights movement, right? Because we have moved away from teaching our children history. So I believe many of us talk about voting like we're going to McDonald's, versus we are literally casting a vote. We are filling a bubble or pulling down a lever on individuals to represent your interest. That means represent what's going on in your house. What happens to your children? Are the communities you're living in, are they safe? The air quality, the food that we eat, everything is political. Who learns ABCs versus sex ed? These are decisions that we are voting for people to represent us. So that is not about ordering a cheeseburger or a small fry at McDonald's. People are voting on the quality of life. And so, yes, we need to understand the power of, or being prepared to vote for the other guy or gal. Because I'm wondering why these gatekeepers got to be gatekeepers. Unless you know that you may not be who the people want, but you are causing fear for them to pull the lever for you. And that's not fair. And that is what I'm seeing. People are afraid of change. You are right. But the pandering of the fear mongering is also what's keeping people voting the same. Because I'm saying, I was here, when the electric bills went up. Vote for me this 1 year and I'll vote to get them down. Well, you were in office when they were going up. What were you saying then? And those are the problems I have with current candidates. You're saying you're going to do this and do that and you're going to do this. You could have done it when I voted for you.
Right.
And then I'll take it one step further. We all need to go back to 2019 and 20. And we have to. Because when the pandemic hit us, granted, it was the unknown. So we're going to say that. Unknown terrain. We didn't know what was happening. We know people were dying. We knew that we had experienced something most of us had never experienced again in their lifetime. I get that. So when Governor Ned Lamont needed executive emergency order power, the lawmakers that we voted for on November 5th in previous years voted, many without hesitation, to hand over their power to Governor Lamont. Now, I understand we were in the unknown and he needed power to make quick decisions. So I get that. Okay, he had to take on that as the governor. The problem is when the state started to open back up and businesses, the private sector started to open back up, why were the lawmakers, why were your lawmakers, why were my lawmakers still raising their hands and handing over their power to not represent me? That is why I'm in the race, one of the other reasons. If you can't stand for me and stand on business and be prepared to fight for me no matter how hard it gets, I'll vote for the other gal or the girl or the other guy or gal who will stand up and say, you know what? My constituents need me today. I won't be raising my hands because the people closest to the problem, former state rep Robin Porter used to always say this, the people closest to the problems are the ones with the solutions. So you don't get to hand over your legislative power to help your constituents to someone who's responsible for 169 towns. That means he cannot focus on your constituent because he's representing every constituent. And that wasn't fair to me or to the taxpayer. That's another reason why I'm fighting, because these career politicians are too comfortable to not say what's needed to be said to protect their constituents and the state's interest because of this messy partisan politics.
Right.
Quality of life is not about Democrat or Republican. Keeping kids safe has nothing to do with your political party, has everything to do with your principles and your values and who you are as an individual. And if you want to protect children, you shouldn't expect our vote November 5th, 2024, or at least not mine.
That's right.
Sorry, I got all emotional.
No, I think you're passionate, and that is what we love to see in our candidates. That means you really are authentically advocating and believing in what you're saying. And so I appreciate that, Gwen, and I appreciate you lifting up the date. And so speaking of dates, and we're talking about elections, we know early voting, as we just heard in the message from our Secretary of State, Stephanie Thomas, early voting.
A great message. I just learned that. I didn't know it was 14 days.
Yes.
I'm glad she said that because I said, I'm telling people they can do early voting now, but it's absentee voting now and early voting, right? So I think they're doing absent because when I went to city clerk's office, because I got a new Senator Samuel Mobile, she got some rust, but she's ready to hit the streets of the District 13. And when I went there, they were telling me they had just sent my name ballots overseas. I'm like, what? For those who are absentee ballots. So yeah, so I'm learning this process on the ground. I'm building this airplane on the ground, but I appreciate that very, very clear message from our Secretary of State. I would say that.
That's right. Early voting. So folks will be able to go out and cast their ballot early, and that includes weekends and weeknights as well. So early voting is going to begin, but the election itself is November 5th. So Gwen, in the last few minutes that we have together, tell us a little bit about again the areas in which you are representing or seeking to represent as a state senator, and what you're planning in the last days leading up to November 5th.
So District 13, you are all of Meriden, parts of Cheshire, all of Middlefield, and parts of Middletown. So for the towns that I said parts, which are Middletown and Cheshire, you need to look up your voting record. So you can do a voter search on the Secretary of State. It'll tell you your voting poll and what district you are. That's very important. Many people didn't even know their district, especially if you're dealing with gentrification. Some of these cities, I got questions. But anyway, please look up your voting record. Then you'll know what district. I am District 13. Again, that is all of Meriden, all of Middlefield, parts of Cheshire, and parts of Middletown. And I am an independent. I have the independent endorsement. So I am row 4D. And I'm actually dedicating that to my 4 children who stood with me through all this advocacy. They don't want any more parts of it. They said they've outgrown it, but they stood with me. And I have 2 children in heaven. And then D is for deliverance, delivering me from self-doubt, because I think all the gatekeepers and the barriers trying to keep me out the race. And so it did self-doubt did creep in there, but I stayed the course, and here I am ready to represent District 13.
Well, that is all right. Where can folks find you online? Are you online, Facebook? How do they get in contact with you?
Yes, so my campaign, my committee is called Mama Gwen 2024, because I don't play about the children. If you don't want a problem, don't mess with the children. I just throw that out there. And so Mama Gwen 2024 on Facebook. I just reached 100 followers yesterday, so now I can do Facebook Live. So many of you look at me at Real Talk Gwen Samuel or Gwen Samuel on Facebook. But you can now watch me on Mama Gwen 2024, so you can hear who I am and what are the issues that I represent.
All right. Well, thank you, Gwen, for joining me on this Civic Beat. We'll have to have you back before November 5th to check in with you and see how the campaign is going. We have all of October, really. So there's time to knock on some doors and get that message out. But for those watching right here, I want you to keep it locked right here on Access TV, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you may be finding this episode, because we're going to bring a lot more to you as well. Lots to talk about as we head into November 5th. And it's not just the national election that we want to talk about. We want to keep it local, because that is really what is affecting, as Gwen stated, your quality of life. So stay informed, stay locked in. We got lots more. Keep it here. Access TV. Thank you so much for joining.
Let me know.